First Counselor Vita stood motionless before the grand observation window of the crystalline spire, her iridescent scales reflecting the golden light of twin suns setting over the horizon. For 3,000 cycles, the Aetherian Empire had known nothing but peace, their civilization flourishing in the pursuit of art, philosophy, and the gentle manipulation of matter itself. The transparent towers of their capital city, New Dawn, stretched toward the stars like frozen music made manifest. That serenity shattered in an instant. The emergency alert rippled through the neural network, causing every Aetherian within the city to freeze mid-motion. Above them, the sky turned an angry crimson as the planetary defense grid activated automatically. Through gaps in the shield coverage, Vita could see it. A massive vessel of obsidian and blood-red metal, its hull bristling with weapon arrays that put their defensive installations to shame. "Impossible," she whispered, her inner membranes flickering with distress. The outer sensor net should have detected any approaching vessels. Her chief scientist, Senar, burst into the chamber, his usual graceful movements replaced by urgent haste. "First Counselor, the vessel. It simply appeared at the edge of our atmosphere. Our instruments indicate it utilized some form of space-folding technology we've never encountered." The ship, easily the size of their largest civic structure, began to descend through the upper atmosphere. Its hull configuration was unlike anything recorded in their extensive diplomatic archives. Not that the Aetherians maintained many military records. Their last armed conflict predated their expansion into space. "Have they responded to our greeting transmissions?" Viva asked, although she already knew the answer. No peaceful species would approach in such a manner. Xenar's scales dulled to an ashamed gray. They responded with weapons fire. The orbital art installations in sectors 3 through 7 have been destroyed. Centuries of artistic achievement, reduced to debris in moments. Vita felt the loss like a physical blow, but forced herself to focus. Activate the secondary shield grid. Begin evacuating the surface structures. First Counselor, we're detecting energy readings from their weapon systems that exceed anything in our database. The secondary shields want. The rest of his sentence was lost in a deafening roar as the alien vessel opened fire. Beams of coherent energy sliced through their supposedly impenetrable shields like light through crystal. One of the city's outlying towers, home to 10,000 souls, crumbled in elegant slow motion. "Send the alert," Viva commanded, her voice steady despite the terror gripping her hearts. "Broadcast on all frequencies, all bandwidths. Surely someone in this sector will hear us." Senar moved to the communication array, his fingers dancing across the controls. "Broadcasting now. But First Counselor, the nearest civilized systems are days away at best. The Galactic Council's response protocols alone take nearly a week to." "Then we pray someone less civilized is listening," Vita replied, watching as another defense platform died in a spectacular explosion. "Someone who doesn't wait for committee approval before taking action." The hostile vessel launched another salvo, this time targeting the planet's primary power distribution nodes. They had developed those nodes for their efficiency in powering atmospheric processors and gravity sculptures, not for surviving military-grade weapons. Across the city, lights began to flicker and die. "First Counselor." One of her aides rushed in, clutching a data crystal. "We're receiving identification markers from the vessel. They're Kraxan." The name sent a chill through every Aetherian present. Even their peaceful society had heard whispers of the Kraxan, a species that appeared from the darkness between stars, striking without warning or mercy, taking what they needed and leaving devastation in their wake. As if to emphasize their reputation, the Kraxan ship launched a spread of missiles that overwhelmed the remaining shields protecting the government district. The crystalline spire shuddered, hairline fractures appearing in its perfect surfaces. "The distress call is broadcasting," Senar reported, his voice tight with barely controlled fear. But who would be brave enough, or perhaps foolish enough, to challenge a Kraxan warship? Vita watched as her beautiful city burned, hoping against hope that someone would answer their plea. They needed a miracle. They needed someone who understood warfare, who could match the Kraxen's brutality with skill and cunning. They needed humans. Captain Amanda Reynolds of the UES Defender was savoring her first cup of coffee when the alert shattered her morning routine. The steaming liquid sloshed over her hand as the ship's AI projected an urgent message across her ready room's display screen. Priority 1 distress signal detected, the AI announced. Source: Aetherian Empire, Crystalline Sector. Multiple civilian casualties reported. Hostile forces engaged. Reynolds set down her cup, military training instantly overriding her desire for caffeine. Show me. The display filled with sensor data and fragmented transmissions. She watched as a massive warship systematically dismantled the Aetherians' orbital defenses. Their crystalline cities, renowned across the galaxy for their beauty, crumbled under sustained weapons fire. Time to target at maximum speed, she asked, already reaching for her uniform jacket. 4 hours, 17 minutes using conventional drive, the AI responded. Caution. Galactic Council protocols require minimum 6-day deliberation period before military intervention in sovereign space. Reynolds smiled grimly as she strode toward the bridge. Good thing we're not very good at following protocols. The bridge crew snapped to attention as she entered. Her XO, Commander James Foster, was already coordinating with engineering. Status report, Reynolds ordered, dropping into her command chair. Engineering reports drives at 98%, Foster replied. Weapons systems hot, point defense grid online. Lieutenant Martinez has some ideas about modifying our railgun loads for maximum effect against energy shielding. Of course he does. Reynolds nodded. Martinez's unconventional engineering solutions had saved their bacon more than once. Get him whatever he needs. What's the council saying? The Galactic Defense Committee is convening an emergency session to discuss potential responses, Communications Officer Lisa Parker reported, not bothering to hide her disgust. Current estimate for resolution, 8 to 12 days. Typical. Reynolds keyed her command channel. All hands, this is the captain. We've got civilians under fire and bureaucrats wringing their hands. Lightning strike protocol is now in effect. Battle stations. The Defender's corridors filled with organized chaos as her crew rushed to their posts. They drilled this scenario countless times, streamlining what other species considered a complex military operation into something approaching an art form. Ma'am, Parker called out. Message from Fleet Command. Reynolds braced herself for the reprimand she knew was coming. Instead, 3 words flashed across her screen. Give him hell. A fierce grin spread across her face. Helm. Plot intercept course. Engineering, I want everything you can give me from those drives. Weapons, begin loading Martinez's special packages. Let's show these Kraxen why picking on peaceful species is a bad idea. Captain, her sensor officer interrupted. I'm reading multiple ships approaching the Aetherian system. Signatures match Galactic Council vessels. Probably coming to tell us not to interfere, Foster muttered. Can't interfere if we're already there, Reynolds replied. Helm, execute emergency jump. Engineering, divert power from non-essential systems to the drive core. The Defender's engines roared to life, pushing the ship to velocities that made other species nervous. Human engineers had learned long ago that safety margins were more like guidelines. Council ships hailing us, Parker reported. Standard response, Reynolds ordered. Communications temporarily unavailable due to emergency operations. And Parker, make it sound apologetic. Her crew worked with practiced efficiency, each member knowing their role in the carefully orchestrated chaos of lightning strike protocol. While other species deliberated, humans acted. While they formed committees, humans saved lives. Weapons range in 3 hours, 52 minutes, Tactical reported. Reynolds studied the tactical display, mind already formulating strategies. The Kraxen vessel was impressive. Twice the size of the Defender, bristling with energy weapons that could vaporize small moons. But size wasn't everything, and energy weapons weren't the only way to break things. "Martine's to bridge," her engineer's voice crackled over the comm. "You're gonna love what I've done with the railguns, Captain. Those fancy shields won't know what hit 'em." "Copy that, Lieutenant." Reynolds settled deeper into her command chair, watching as her ship hurtled toward what any sane species would consider impossible odds. But humans had never been very good at accepting impossible odds. They specialized in doing the insane, the improbable, the just crazy enough to work. And right now, several million Aetherians were about to learn exactly why the phrase, "humans are on the way," brought hope to their allies and terror to their enemies. Dancing with dragons. The Defender dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Aetherian system, its hull still crackling with residual energy from pushing the engines far beyond their rated capacity. Captain Reynolds stood at her tactical display, watching as the sensor data painted a grim picture of the situation below. "Status report," she commanded, her voice steady despite the horror of watching another crystalline tower collapse under Kraxan weapons fire. "Their shield configuration is unlike anything we've encountered." Lieutenant Santos reported from tactical. "Multiple overlapping energy fields, probably designed to shrug off modern beam weapons. But there's something familiar about the emission pattern." Reynolds leaned closer to the display, recognition dawning in her eyes. "It's like looking at an old photograph," she murmured. "Commander Foster, pull up the historical archives. Earth naval battles, specifically the Battle of Midway." Her XO's fingers danced across his console. "Ma'am, look at their attack pattern. The way they're systematically taking out defensive positions while maintaining a perfect broadside position." Reynolds traced the Kraxan ship's movement with her finger. "They're fighting like old Earth battleships. They're expecting everyone to engage them head-on with energy weapons." A slow smile spread across Foster's face. "Good thing we brought something a little more primitive." "Lieutenant Martinez," Reynolds catercom. "Tell me you've got those railguns ready." "Better than ready, Captain." The engineer's voice crackled with barely contained excitement. "We've modified the tungsten rounds with a crystalline matrix coating. The enemy's sensors are calibrated for energy weapons. These will look like background radiation until they hit." "Helm, bring us in on Vector 7-3 Mark IV, Reynolds ordered. "Nice and casual, like we're just another council ship coming to watch." The Defender glided through space with deceptive grace, its approach measured and unthreatening. On the main viewer, the Kraxan warship loomed like a malevolent shadow, its obsidian hull absorbing local starlight. "Enemy vessel is hailing," communications reported. On screen, the bridge crew got their first look at a Kraxan commander, tall, angular, with chitinous plates where humans had skin. "This is Warmaster Kex of the Eternal Hunger. You have entered an active combat zone. Remove yourself or be destroyed." Reynolds smiled pleasantly. "This is Captain Amanda Reynolds of the UES Defender. We're here to discuss your unauthorized presence in Aetherian space." The Warmaster's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. "Your vessel is half our size, human. Your weapons cannot penetrate our shields. Leave now, and we might forget your insolence." "About those shields," Reynolds nodded to tactical. "Martinez, show them what humans think about relying too heavily on advanced technology." The railgun spoke. Tungsten rounds, accelerated to a significant fraction of light speed, crossed the space between ships in milliseconds. The Kraxan's sophisticated sensor suite, designed to track energy weapons, registered nothing until it was too late. The rounds punched through their outer shields like they weren't there, slamming into the hull with devastating kinetic force. "Direct hits on their port weapon arrays," Santos reported, grinning. "Their shields are reconfiguring, but they've never dealt with kinetic weapons of this magnitude." The Kraxan ship wheeled ponderously, trying to bring its functional weapons to bear. But Reynolds had already studied their limitations. They moved like a surface naval vessel, expecting space combat to follow the same rules as ocean warfare. "Helm, full thrust on my mark," she ordered. "Engineering, ready for maximum power to forward shields." They're about to show us their fancy energy weapons. The Eternal Hunger's remaining weapons blazed to life, filling space with deadly beams of coherent energy. But the Defender was already moving, executing maneuvers that would have been impossible on water, taking advantage of the true three-dimensional nature of space combat. "They're pursuing," Foster reported. "Just like you predicted, Captain. They're staying in formation even though they don't have to." Old habits die hard. Reynolds allowed herself a small smile. Even aliens apparently need to unlearn some basic assumptions. Let's show them why humans excel at thinking outside the box. "Helm, prepare for attack pattern Delta 6. Martinez, load the special packages we prepared for their engines." As the Defender spun through space in a dance of impossible angles, the crew could almost feel the Kraxan commander's frustration. They had expected an easy victory over primitive humans. Instead, they were learning a harsh lesson about underestimating a species that had turned warfare into an art form. "You know what they say," Reynolds mused as another salvo of railgun rounds found their mark. "Sometimes the old ways are the best ways." Lieutenant Jake Martinez stood in the gleaming central chamber of the Aetherian Science Institute, surrounded by technology so advanced it bordered on magical. Crystalline computers processed data through light itself, atmospheric processors maintained perfect climate control, and gravity sculptures defied physics in ways that made his engineer's heart skip a beat. And he was about to teach them how to turn it all into weapons. "You want to do what?" First Scientist Senar's scales shifted through various shades of disbelief as Martinez explained his plan. "Convert your atmospheric processors into mass drivers," Martinez repeated, already examining the crystalline architecture of their systems. "Look, these processors already manipulate particles at near-light speeds. We just need to adjust their purpose a bit." The young engineer moved through the facility like a kid in a candy store, his trained eye seeing potential weapons in every piece of supposedly peaceful technology. Captain Reynolds had given him 2 hours to work his magic, while the Defender kept the Kraxan ship occupied. "But these are tools of creation," another Aetherian scientist protested. "They maintain our world's delicate atmospheric balance. They're not meant for destruction." Martinez finished, pulling tools from his kit. Neither was dynamite, originally. Sometimes the best weapons are just tools pointed in a different direction. "Watch this." His fingers flew across the processor's control crystal, reprogramming its fundamental parameters. The Aetherians watched in horror and fascination as their precious atmospheric manipulator hummed to life with a distinctly different tone. Instead of spreading particles to create perfect weather patterns, Martinez explained, "We're concentrating them into a tight beam. Physics doesn't care what we intend to do with it. Kinetic energy is kinetic energy." Senar moved closer, his scientific curiosity overtaking his initial revulsion. The power requirements for such a conversion would be massive. Martinez grinned. "Good thing you've got those lovely gravity sculptures storing enough potential energy to power a small sun." Speaking of which, he gestured to the floating artistic displays that decorated the institute. "Those are going to make excellent targeting systems." A junior scientist named Vela approached with a data crystal. "Lieutenant, I've been studying your ship's sensor data on the Kraxan vessel. Their shield configuration leaves a microscopic vulnerability when they fire their main weapons." "Show me," Martinez said, and immediately spotted what she meant. "Perfect. We can use your quantum scanners to..." "Hold on." He paused, an idea striking. "Those scanners, they're meant for analyzing stellar phenomena, right?" "Correct," Vela confirmed. "They can detect particle changes at the subatomic level across vast distances." Martinez's grin grew wider. "And your gravity sculptures can manipulate matter at that same scale. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe we just found our targeting computer." For the next hour, the unlikely team worked to transform the Aetherians' peaceful scientific instruments into a coordinated weapons platform. Martinez taught them how to convert power distribution nodes into shield generators, showed them how their artistic gravity wells could become devastating force multipliers. "I don't understand," Xenar admitted as they finished calibrating the first makeshift mass driver. "Your species is centuries behind us in many technologies. How do you see these possibilities that we missed?" Martins paused in his work, considering the question. "Humans have a saying, necessity is the mother of invention. We spent most of our history fighting each other, learning to use whatever we had on hand. When all you've got is a hammer, you get really creative about what counts as a nail." A distant explosion rocked the facility. Above them, they could see energy beams from a Kraxan ship exchanging fire with the Defender's more conventional weapons. "You're Captain Reynolds," Vela observed. "She fights like no commander I've ever seen. The Kraxan vessel is twice her size, yet she maneuvers as though the laws of physics are merely suggestions." "That's because humans don't believe in no-win scenarios," Martins replied, making final adjustments to their improvised weapon system. "We look at something impossible and think, how can we make this possible, instead of accepting defeat." Another explosion, closer this time. Martins keyed his communicator. "Captain, ground team here. You're not going to believe what we've cooked up with the local technology. Tell the Kraxan they're about to see what happens when you combine human ingenuity with Aetherian precision." Above them, the first of their repurposed atmospheric processors hummed to life, ready to demonstrate that in human hands, even the most peaceful technology could become an instrument of resistance. War Master Kex watched with growing frustration as the human vessel danced through his targeting solutions like smoke. The Eternal Hunger's weapons, capable of reducing small moons to vapor, couldn't land a solid hit on the nimble Earth ship. "Impossible," he snarled, mandibles clicking in agitation. "No vessel that size should be able to maneuver like that. Their inertial dampeners should have failed 3 maneuvers ago." "Sir," his sensor officer called out, "we're detecting unusual energy signatures from the planet's surface. The Aetherians appear to be." The rest of his report vanished in a flash of light as a concentrated beam of hyper-accelerated particles slammed into the Eternal Hunger's port shield grid. Alarms screamed across the bridge as systems registered damage that, according to their tactical computers, shouldn't have been possible. Aboard the Defender, Captain Reynolds allowed herself a small smile. "Martinez, I see your science project is up and running." "Just getting started, Captain," her engineer's voice crackled through the comm. "Xenar and his team are bringing 3 more online now. These atmospheric processors make our railguns look like slingshots." Reynolds watched as another beam lanced up from the planet's surface, perfectly timed with the Defender's next attack run. The Kraxan shift shields flickered under the combined assault, their carefully layered energy field struggling to adapt to attacks coming from multiple vectors. "Status report," she called out, watching the tactical display with practiced eyes. "Enemy shields at 60% and falling," Santos reported from Tactical. "They're trying to compensate, but they can't seem to decide whether to focus on us or the ground-based weapons. Their formation is breaking down." Commander Foster leaned over his console. "Captain, look at their movement pattern. They're starting to drift from their naval warfare doctrine. They're getting desperate." "Good." Reynolds keyed her tactical command channel. "All stations, execute attack pattern Echo 7. Martinez, time your next shot to coincide with our forward battery." The Defender swooped through a series of impossible maneuvers, its human crew pushing their artificial gravity to its limits. Reynolds had drilled them relentlessly for moments like this, teaching them to function even when their inner ears screamed that physics had stopped making sense. On the planet below, Martinez watched through the repurposed gravity sculptures as the battle unfolded in real time. The Aetherian scientists had moved past their initial horror at weaponizing their technology and were now fully engaged, their natural precision and attention to detail proving invaluable. "Calculating targeting solution," Vela announced, her scales shimmering with excitement. "Lieutenant, if we modify the particle stream's quantum structure." "Do it," Martins grinned, recognizing the elegant brutality of her suggestion. Captain, you're going to want to clear the area above Sector 7. Things are about to get interesting. The Kraxan vessel fired another devastating barrage, but the defender was already gone, executing a maneuver that looked more like a racing move than combat tactics. The energy beams passed through empty space as 4 separate particle streams converged from the planet's surface. Direct hit, Santos called out. Enemy shield grid is destabilizing. They've lost coherence in sectors 3 through 5. Reynolds nodded grimly. Now they know how the Aetherians felt. All batteries, concentrate fire on their exposed sections. Martinez, keep up the pressure from the ground. The Eternal Hunger's response came as a surprise to everyone. Instead of continuing their methodical assault, the massive vessel suddenly accelerated straight toward the defender, weapons blazing in every direction. They're going to ram us, Foster announced, his voice tight with tension. No, Reynolds corrected, studying their movement. They're trying to get close enough that we won't risk firing the heavy weapons. They think we're as afraid of collateral damage as they are. She opened a channel to the engine room. All hands, brace for close quarters combat. Let's show them how humans handle boarding actions back on Earth's oceans. As the massive Kraxan ship bore down on them, its crew would learn another harsh lesson about humanity. The closer the combat, the more dangerous humans became. The Defender shuddered as another impact rocked its hull. Emergency lighting cast red shadows across the bridge as Captain Reynolds coordinated her crew's desperate defense against the Kraxan's relentless assault. Hull breach on Deck 3, Foster reported, his hands flying across the damage control console. Emergency bulkheads holding, but we've lost pressure in sections 12 through 15. Redirect power from non-essential systems, Reynolds ordered, gripping her chair as the artificial gravity fluctuated. Status on the enemy vessel. They're still trying to lock on with their boarding tubes, Santos called out from tactical. Their next attempt will. The ship lurched violently, throwing several crew members from their stations. A grinding screech of metal on metal echoed through the hull. Contact. Security Chief Sarah Cooper's voice crackled through the comm. They'd breached the outer hull on Deck 4. We've got boarders. Reynolds punched up the internal security feeds. Kraxan warriors, their chidness armor gleaming in the emergency lights, were pouring through the breach point, but they were meeting something they hadn't expected: prepared human defenders. Remember your training. Cooper's voice echoed through the security channel as her teams engaged the boarders. They're used to fighting in open space. These corridors are our territory. The Defender's Marine contingent had drilled extensively for this scenario. Where other species saw spacecraft corridors as limitations, humans had centuries of experience fighting in confined spaces. Every intersection became a choke point, every maintenance shaft an ambush point. Engineering to bridge. Martinez's voice cut through the chaos. Captain, we've got problems with the main reactor. That last hit knocked out the cooling systems. Reynolds switched channels. Options. Working on it, Martins replied, the sound of tools clanging in the background. But I need 10 minutes to reroute the auxiliary systems. You've got 5, Reynolds responded. After that, we'll be too busy being dead to care. Down in engineering, Martinez and his team worked with desperate efficiency. Chief Engineer Paula Rodriguez was already halfway inside an access tunnel, manually realigning power conduits while holding her breath against the vacuum leak. Chief, Martinez called out. The emergency patches aren't holding. Rodriguez's voice came through their sealed comm channel. Because they're not supposed to. Get me the whole foam from Emergency Kit 3. We're doing this the old-fashioned way. On the bridge, Reynolds watched as more Kraxan warriors breached their hull. But something was changing in the battle. The alien warriors, expecting an easy victory against primitive humans, were instead facing an enemy that seemed to thrive in chaos. Ma'am, Foster reported, a note of pride in his voice. Cooper's teams have sealed off 3 breach points using emergency welding gear. They're actually pushing the Kraxan back. The enemy vessel is shifting position, Santos added, They're trying to create more breach points, but their movements are becoming erratic. Reynolds nodded grimly. They're used to battles being decided by superior technology. They don't know how to handle an enemy that improves under pressure. In engineering, Martinez and his team had jury-rigged a cooling system using parts from the ship's water reclamation unit and what looked suspiciously like modified coffee makers. Rodriguez emerged from the access tunnel, her suit covered in emergency sealant foam. "It's not pretty," she reported, checking the readings, "but it'll hold. Reactor temperatures stabilizing." "Bridge, engineering," Martinez called out. "We've got power back to all essential systems. And Captain, I think we found a way to turn their boarding tubes against them." Reynolds allowed herself a small smile. "Explain." "They're using focused energy beams to cut through our hull, right? Well, we just figured out how to reverse the polarity of our shield grid. Next time they try to breach, they're in for a nasty surprise." The battle continued to rage through the defenders' corridors, but the tide was turning. Human Marines, using tactics perfected in centuries of terrestrial warfare, held their ground. Engineering teams sealed breaches with everything from standard equipment to improvised patches. Even the ship's medical staff joined the fight, their knowledge of xenobiology proving invaluable in predicting and countering cracks in movements. "Captain," Foster said quietly, "3 Galactic Council vessels just entered the system." "Let them wash," Reynolds replied, her eyes fixed on the tactical display. "Let them see what happens when you back humans into a corner. All hands, prepare for counteroffensive. It's time to show the Kraxan why humanity's greatest strength isn't our technology. It's our refusal to accept defeat." Captain Reynolds stood at her tactical station, studying the battle damage reports when something caught her eye. The Kraxan's attack pattern had shifted again, but this time it wasn't just tactical adaptation. There was something else in their movements, something she recognized from humanity's own history. "Commander Foster," she called out, "pull up the sensor readings from their engine signature. Focus on their fuel consumption rates." Her XO complied, and the data streamed across their displays. Reynolds' suspicion deepened as she analyzed the numbers. "They're burning fuel at an impossible rate," she murmured. "Look at these readings. They're not just fighting aggressively. They're fighting desperately, like they don't care about having enough fuel for a retreat." "Suicide mission," Foster suggested grimly. "No," Reynolds shook her head. "This is something else. Lieutenant Parker, get me a direct channel to War Master Kex. Low bandwidth, text only." "Mom." Parker's fingers hesitated over her console. "Trust me." Reynolds began typing as soon as the channel opened. "War Master Kex, your ship's power signature suggests you're burning through resources at an unsustainable rate. You're fighting like someone who has nowhere else to go. What are you running from?" The bridge crew held their breath as they waited for a response. When it came, it wasn't what anyone expected. "Your perception is keen, Captain Reynolds." Kex's message scrolled across the screen. "But understanding our situation will not save your ship or the Aetherians' resources." Reynolds typed back, "Maybe not, but humans learned long ago that the most dangerous enemies are the ones fighting for survival. What happened to your homeworld?" A longer pause this time. The tactical display showed the Eternal Hunger's weapons still tracking them, but not firing. "Our sun is dying." Kex's response finally came. "Our system will be uninhabitable within 1 planetary cycle. The Galactic Council denied our petition for relocation rights, said our species was too aggressive for peaceful coexistence." Reynolds looked up at her senior staff, seeing the recognition in their eyes. Humanity had faced similar challenges in their early space age: environmental disasters, resource depletion, the desperate need to expand or die. "Lieutenant Martinez," she called over the comm, "are you still linked with the Aetherian science team?" "Yes, Captain. Senar and Vela are here with me." "Put them on. I need to know something." She waited for the connection. "First, scientist Senar, your atmospheric processors. They're not just for maintaining your current atmosphere, are they?" There was a pause before the Aetherian scientist responded. No, Captain. They were originally designed for planetary engineering, for making hostile worlds habitable, but we abandoned such aggressive expansion centuries ago. Reynolds smiled. But you still have the technology, the knowledge. She turned back to her communications panel. Warmaster Kex, what if I told you there was a solution that didn't require anyone to die? The Aetherians have terraforming technology that could save your people. You expect us to believe they would help us after we attacked them. Kex's response held bitter skepticism. I expect you to understand that not everyone sees violence as the only answer. Reynolds typed. Humanity learned that lesson the hard way. Sometimes the strongest weapon is the willingness to listen. The Eternal Hunger's weapons powered down slowly, section by section. On the bridge displays, the Kraxan ship's energy signature shifted from combat readiness to a more neutral stance. Our people are proud warriors, Captain Reynolds. Kex's message read, We do not easily accept charity. Then don't think of it as charity, Reynolds responded. Think of it as a chance to build something instead of destroy it. My engineers tell me your space-folding technology is decades ahead of anything humans or Aetherians have developed. Imagine what we could accomplish together. The next message took several minutes to arrive. You are suggesting an exchange. Our technological knowledge for their terraforming capabilities. I'm suggesting, Reynolds typed carefully, that 3 species working together might solve problems that none of us could handle alone. Humanity's adaptability, Aetherian precision, and Kraxan determination. The Galactic Council wants us all to stay in our separate boxes. I say we show them a better way. As she waited for the response, Reynolds watched the tactical display, where Galactic Council ships hovered at the system's edge, no doubt recording everything. Let them watch, she thought. Let them see what happens when someone finally asks why instead of just shooting. The Grand Assembly Chamber of the Crystalline Spire had never hosted such an unlikely gathering. Captain Reynolds stood before representatives of 3 species, her dress uniform still showing scorch marks from the recent battle. Behind her, the chamber's transparent walls revealed repair crews, human, Aetherian, and Kraxan working side by side to rebuild the damaged city. The terms of the alliance are straightforward. Reynolds addressed the assembly, her voice carrying through the pristine acoustics. The Aetherians will provide their terraforming technology to save the Kraxan homeworld. The Kraxan will share their space-folding drive systems, and humanity will contribute our experience in adaptation and crisis management. First Counselor Vita's scales shimmered with cautious optimism. The Council representatives are demanding we halt these negotiations. They claim this alliance violates several treaties regarding technology sharing. Let them complain. Warmaster Kex clicked his mandibles in what humans had learned was amusement. They denied us aid because they feared our warrior nature. Now they fear our cooperation even more. Lieutenant Martinez, who had spent the past week working with both Aetherian and Kraxan engineers, stepped forward. We've already completed preliminary tests combining Kraxan fold space principles with Aetherian crystal matrices. The efficiency improvements are beyond anything we expected. And our atmospheric processors? Sinar asked, his scientific curiosity overtaking his usual reserve. Have you found a way to adapt them for the Kraxan system? Better, Martins grinned. Your teams have been holding back. Once we showed them how to think outside conventional parameters, they discovered applications even we hadn't considered. The Kraxan sun isn't just dying. It's going to go supernova. But with modified Aetherian technology, we can stabilize it. Commander Foster, monitoring communications from the Defender, interrupted with news. Captain, the Council ships are moving into blocking positions. They're demanding we cease all technological exchange immediately. Reynolds smiled. Remind them that according to their own laws, they have no jurisdiction over voluntary cooperation between sovereign species, and perhaps mention that we've already transmitted the preliminary designs to all 3 homeworlds. The chamber erupted in surprised murmurs. Kex turned his angular head toward Reynolds. You anticipated their interference. Humanity learned early that it's easier to ask forgiveness than permission, she replied, especially when dealing with bureaucrats who'd rather follow rules than save lives. But what happens when they retaliate? Vida asked. The Council controls most major trade routes, most resource-rich systems. Then we make new routes, Reynolds answered. The Kraxan Fold space drive combined with Aetherian crystal technology and human navigation techniques. We can establish corridors they don't even know exist. While they're busy writing strongly worded protests, we'll be building something new. Martinez nodded enthusiastically. We've already drawn up plans for hybrid ships. Aetherian crystal matrices for computational systems, Kraxan space-folding tech for propulsion, and human-style adaptable modular construction. They'll be able to outmaneuver anything the Council has. And what of our cultural differences? An elder Kraxan warrior challenged. We are warriors. The Aetherians are scholars, and humans are impossible to categorize, Reynolds suggested. Good. The Council wants every species to stay in their assigned role. But look around this room. In 1 week, we've accomplished more through cooperation than centuries of isolation. She gestured to the crews working outside. Your warriors are learning to create instead of destroy. The Aetherians are discovering their peaceful technology has applications they never imagined. And humans, we're doing what we do best. Adapting, learning, bringing people together. Vida rose, her crystalline staff catching the light. Then let us make it official. Not just an alliance of convenience, but a true partnership. 3 species, each contributing their strengths, none trying to dominate the others. The Council won't approve, Kex noted, but his tone suggested this didn't concern him. They don't have to, Reynolds replied. Humanity spent too long waiting for approval from others. Sometimes you have to forge your own path. She turned to address the entire chamber. They call us young, primitive, unpredictable. But maybe that's exactly what this galaxy needs, someone willing to try something new. Outside the chamber, the first rays of dawn painted the crystalline city in colors of hope. 3 fleets hung in high orbit, not in combat formation, but in cooperation. And across the galaxy, other species watched and wondered if perhaps the old ways weren't always the best ways. The message spread quickly. When you need the impossible done, when old rules need breaking, when new paths need forging, call the humans. They'll bring friends.